the person at the foul line immediately starts backpedaling as fast as they can, as far as they can until they get past.
Hmm.
So we compete players against players. The goal is to see who can get the furthest backpedal. And I try to partner them up with even speeds or as close as I can. And then we'll do the same thing with a shuffle.
That was Lee Taft, and you're listening to the Just Fly Performance Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to have Lee Taft back on the show. Lee, of course, a well-recognized expert in the world of sport speed development. Lee has not only experience in athletic performance, but he also has a background in physical education, and he also coaches varsity basketball along with tons of other sports that he has coached. And this podcast is an awesome discussion with Lee on how he integrates skills not only in individual movements, such as using different layers of bands for change of direction, but how he trains speed in context of a sport practice and how he links in the movements that he works on in individual performance and more traditional athletic performance. How does that manifest in a team sport setting? This and so much more. It was awesome to have Lee on the show. I always enjoy talking to him and excited to get this episode going. Let's get to 428 here with Lee Taft. Lee, excited to have you back on the show. I know you've been coaching basketball and I have tons of questions to ask you. So thanks for being on here again. I'm excited to get this going.
Oh, likewise, Joel. When you asked, I was excited and couldn't wait to be on. I always have a good time talking with you.
Yeah, it's that linking between like movement and sport and decision making and how it all works together. That whole like a triangle or ecosystem is so intriguing to me. You had a post recently, or it might not have been recently, it might have been months ago, but it stuck with me. And you were talking about coaching your high school basketball team and the idea of moving as one brain, like just trying to get that collective speed to work. And I think so often, and I think it's good. Local, we go local. We find things that are local that can be improved, but then also there's a different dynamic when it's social and everyone's together. And what I wanted to ask you, or the kind of the kickoff of this conversation, was how do you view, or does your viewpoint on speed and movement change when you are now the umbrella of the head basketball coach? And it's a different, So how does that go when you're there versus working with a couple clients in the garage or out in the field or something like that?
Absolutely. That's a really, really good question. And it's a question that I think indirectly I answer a lot for other coaches who ask me. They're like, hey, I'm a coach of a soccer team or a, lacrosse team, and, we're going to do speed development. So especially, with your depth of knowledge in sprint technique and mechanics, and to improve a sprinter versus making a volleyball team faster, or making in my case, my boys basketball team. So what I do, Joel, is I look at it like, okay, I need you to be able to make more plays because of speed, defensively, offensively, and transitionally going between the two. And so a lot of my foundation starts with language. And so my kids hear it all the time. Matter of fact, when they don't see that I'm near them, I can hear them talking sometimes. They'll kind of making fun of me because I'm always saying, guys, you've got to escape this space and attack new space. I said, you're on the elbow, but the play is now out on the wing. You got to escape the elbow and attack that wing space. How are you going to do that? What's the footwork? So when we're working this team speed, it's like if you and I are teammates, Joel, and both you and I are on top playing defense, when you move and escape space to make a play, I have to fill in the space behind you. And then the next guy fills my space in. And as you kind of mentioned earlier about thinking alike as a team and kind of one brain. We talk about this all the time. We got to play as, kind of one brain. And it's the idea of, can we see something together? Do we see what's going on together? And now once we start moving, can we move on a string and we all move together? And so the speed that we work on a lot of times is that concept of escaping, attacking space. Now, yesterday happened to be a sprint day for my team and training. Right now we're off-season conditioning and training, and we're weightlifting. So we went outside and we did our sprint workout as a team. And I'm watching each guy. I had probably 19 guys yesterday, something like that. A little bit short. We had some guys that couldn't be there. So they're doing their sprints, and we're shorter distance right now. We're just kind of getting into it. So we're 20 meters, maybe 25 meters was our last. And giving cues to each couple when they came by, because I ran them in twos. So two went by, and I would say, "Hey, Joel, don't forget your arms. Need to help, right? That's like we talked about." And somebody else I might say, don't reach, stop reaching, just step, 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 step. So it's just constant little bites of information. Now, if this was my track team, now it's a different approach because that is the skill. For my basketball team, sprinting perfectly really doesn't make us necessarily a better team. It might help a little bit, maybe, but not sure. But just so they're safe and effective. So it's funny because I've been a track coach for, my first year of coaching high school track was 35 years ago. So I've been doing it a long time. So my brain has to switch from, all right, does my center have to have perfect Usain Bolt, mechanics? And I don't think so. They don't really need to, but we just want to make sure they're safe and they do the right thing. So that's kind of how my brain switches a little bit when we're doing team, but it really does come down to the language, attack space. And what it does is my players move quicker when I use that language versus just, a technical body action language.
Yeah. My brain runs what you just said through the sport team that I'm coaching is just youth soccer. And it's fun because like, these are the most basic. I mean, for me, it's been amazing. It's like, if you're going to be coaching sports and sports skills and team sports, youth is a great place to start because these are all the fundamentals of just space and intention and how kids learn. And one of the games I like a lot, I like this app called Team Mojo. It's like has age appropriate games for all the, all right, you coach 6-year-olds. Here's all the games that are fun and engaging for 6-year-olds. Here's 8-year-olds. And I wish, like, in watching different sports around the area, I wish more coaches use this thing because it's absolutely amazing. It's like, it's so relevant and engaging. And one of the games is for soccer, it's called Wreck-It Ralph, where it's like, I don't even remember the actual, like, I guess, you know, I'm supposed to be Wreck-It Ralph or something, but like, and the coaches and the kids are running around, but like, you have 4 boxes and they're about, 30 feet apart, and the boxes are like, 8x8 or something.
Yeah.
And they have to dribble from box to box, but they have to be watching for the coach because they don't want the coach to get their ball. But it's like, how can we scale this up into now it's like territories and get to that space, and it's just in it and the intention behind it. I find it's interesting too, because even kids, like if we do relay races at the end of soccer, they don't actually know how to like sprint without looking around sometimes. Like they have to like look at their buddy, see where they're at. It's just, it's interesting how intention and awareness and perception influences how you move. And that's where, that's the word I wrote down when you were talking about like attacking or escaping space is the intention you create behind. It's basically like, hey, it's just scaling up these things. It's scaling up Wreck-It Ralph. And it's just, so I think about it in that way. And to your point with what you said with basketball players, it's, it's funny. There was like, a video of Caitlin Clark doing just a running workout, running and shooting. And you watch her running, it's like major heel striking. It's just funny because you would say, oh, that's terrible. And yeah, maybe you could clean it up a little bit. But at the same time, then she goes and shoots and she's popping off the balls with her feet just fine. Clearly feet work fine.
That's right.
And you figure she probably just stays low when she plays. And it's kind of how she moves. I've seen NBA players even run with kind of a heel strike manner. And it's interesting to think about how, what do we need to fix versus how is this athlete who I'm sure Caitlin had a very diverse multi-sport, at least in Iowa. Like everyone plays a lot of sports in Iowa, right? Like growing up and has adapted to however she ended up playing like that. So it's interesting to think about that.
It is. Well, look at Steph Curry's arm action. I've said this from his years at Davidson, watching him run. He's got a very different running action, but are we going to spend a practice time worried about that with Steph Curry? You know what I mean? It becomes coaching selection, the choices that you select to improve not only the individual, but the team. And it's like, I don't care what his arms look like, really. He's still going to knock it down from 30, right? And and it doesn't interfere with his body. It's not causing injury because he's not holding that position for 100 meters or 200 meters where over time, yeah, maybe there would be some wear and tear on his spine because he, whatever. But in basketball, yeah, how many guys do you watch or women watch some of the, I watch the WNBA religiously, watch some of them run up the court. And you're looking at him, you're saying, running form's not great, but they just had 20 and 10.
Yeah. I mean, obviously you would want for them to, like, if it's high school and earlier on, right, or middle school, of course you'd want to provide some constraints or some coaching for them to have an opportunity to be a little better, in there. But once they reach that high performance, you definitely have to ask that question.
Yeah. And that's why off camera, you and I were talking about, like I was mentioning, I have kind of a locomotive literacy, curriculum that I really push. Well, that's why the kindergarteners and the first graders and the second, third, and fourth, fifth, and they progress up through. Can you imagine if all our kids went through that model growing up in America, and by the time they got to sixth, seventh grade, they all knew how to properly run? How many more potential injuries we could reduce and performances could raise? We don't know for sure, but I would, if I was going to place a bet, I'd place it that it would help. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you would say with that heel striking, if that athlete had the option to run well and not do that, that would probably be a good thing, like, especially too, like mid-level and looking at it over time. It's good to have those options of movement and be generally better. That's what I think too, even like, I think we were also talking about before, like I have these they're dog agility hurdles that I bought because they're like super inexpensive. You can use them for the most basic hurdle hops. I use them for athletes training in the garage with rhythm stuff over the hurdle or whatever. And my kids will actually take them out and jump over them. But it's just funny to watch them like sprint up to the hurdle to jump over it. Because in some respects, that's the most straight line sprinting they often do. And they're playing if they're like 6, 7 years old, because they usually are playing just change of direction stuff. So it's interesting to watch children run just in context and how they develop. And you just think about how important it is to have at least some track experience at some point. I feel like even if you don't run track, hey, if you can at least run over like a few hurdles here and there as you're growing up, that'll probably help you out.
100%. Sure does. I agree. 100%.
Yeah. You're mentioning, Lee, the off-season conditioning. I was curious in season what your approach to like conditioning, sprinting. Obviously, you have that sense of, here's how we're running in practice. And I think that's probably, I'm really interested because you have all these worlds of, that you've been through. So to have that feel and understanding of how much they need to run and where, I'm totally curious how you approach that conditioning and extra running outside of practice in season with basketball.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And I was actually having a conversation this morning with the athlete I had right before we got on. She's a pretty high level soccer player that plays in kind of a higher level club. And she actually came off an ACL injury, and we're about 9 months now, 10 months. So we're doing a lot of stuff, but we got talking about like her coach that she plays for does a lot of additional conditioning without the ball and without playing and it was funny because she actually commented to him during one of the press. She goes, well, why don't we combine the two so we can get more touches and stuff like that, And I'm like, good for you. So in my practices, when we get to game, I'll talk about in season first. When we're in season, everything we do is either offensive, defensive, transition, or special situations with a ball live. Could be 1-on-1, could be 2-on-2, 3-on-3, small-sided, could be, advantage type games where there's maybe 4 offensive players and 2 or 3 defenses, stuff like that. But it's very much built around decision-making, which is very popular now. Everybody's talking about that, but that's really how obviously athletes gain experiences in various situations, is by being put in situations to decide what should come next. So we do a ton of that. I am very big on high-paced practices. When I teach with few words, and I say, go. They do it. They make a mistake. I don't freak out over it. I might stop real quick and say, hey, Joel, why did you pass there? And you're like, well, coach, I thought he was going to cut. Good. Let's go. Ready, go. But if you said, I don't know, I said, well, okay, well, That's one thing we want to work on. Don't, make sure you understand. Okay, ready, go. And it's, 10-second bites, information. The players absorb that really quick, and then we move on. And so my conditioning, this would be my third year at this school. Maybe once I put him on the line and we ran because I was ticked off at him for something, and I just went out of character, and I'm like, all right, I'm done. Get on the line. We're running. And it was one of those things like, you're running until I'm tired. But I never do that. And I forget what it was anyway. But typically our practices are so fast paced. We have days where there's a lot of change of direction full court. So very game-like, 5-on-5, Friday night game-like. But then the next day, the change of direction, everything is going to be half court based. So we're doing a little bit more repetition, because when you play half court, you can get more reps in, you take out the transition. But they're actually getting more lateral change of direction, which is more quad dominant, which is another level of fatigue. So we can sandwich the different type of workouts in, and then I'll even have a day where it's very special situation, out of bounds, getting pressed, 7 seconds to go. We do it, and then we'll go to the chalkboard, and we'll watch the camera, and we'll look at it. So that's my rest day. A lot of learning. They need it, but we can get a really important area of basketball done, which are those special situations. But that's how I work my conditioning. I would do that a different way if I was coaching track, or right now we're in off season where we're not really coaching basketball. We're doing, they get open gym time and stuff, but it's not. So I manipulate it differently through the conditioning. But when we're in season, I manipulate the variables of conditioning and speed. We sprint once a week in season, twice a week out of season. In season, we try to sprint once every 7 to 8 days. And usually it's a maximum of 4 reps and roughly 20 to 30 meters based on how I think they feel. I'm just trying to keep their turnover high and early pushing. And then off season, we just cycle through the 6-week sprint program, which is 20 yards 1 week, 25, 30, 35, 40. And then the last week is 50, but it goes from 5 reps week 1 down to 2 reps. And it just kind of cycles down. And that I've been doing that for years and years and years. I have a lot of athletes doing it. It's very simple. And then we do our other stuff, our jumps and upper body throw, stuff like that. So yeah, hopefully, I don't know if that answered it, but hopefully that gave an idea.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say too, I like that, like you got mad one day and just, you got to run. Like I think about that a lot in the sense, like if I was coaching, and I would someday I would love to coach, like even just like freshman basketball or something. And I just feel like, I think about that and I feel like it's kind of out of character for me to get mad and make people run, but I would need to do it. Like I would have to like talk to myself in the mirror and pretend, like act like I'm angry. I don't know. I just feel like it's almost like a thing where when you're a freshman and sophomore, I do think you need a little bit of that. Just, maybe later you can optimize the performance a little bit more later. It's
well, you know what it was too? And because this is really the only time I ever, lose my cool, is when they're kind of lazy.
Yeah.
But they're also very talkative and not paying attention. And so I'll say, okay, next 5, you're out, and you do what we just did, and none of them know what's going on. Yeah. I'm like, all right, that's it. Get on the line. We're going. And it snaps them in really fast. Exactly. And I have to do it one time, maybe a season, and then they get it. Like, I'm not going to mess around. Because I tell the guys, I'm like, the goal is let's get in shape with the things that we're going to do a lot. You know what I mean? Like I could, obviously go, a lot of coaches still run their kids for distance and miles and stuff. And I'm like, we're going to get our aerobic conditioning a different way. But when we're in season and we need to have this interval type movement and, burst training, I call it, let's do it. Let's do it during our press and during our offensive fast break, and we run on every opportunity we can. So when the kids understand it, they're usually pretty good, but they have those young kid days too, like we all do. So
yeah. I was going to say, yeah, exactly. I know that the intensity of the game is the best conditioning for the game. The way you get into those zone 4 and zone 5 heart rates. I mean, if you just do a bunch of long, slow zone 3 stuff, it's not going to get you in condition for the game. You're going to get real tired because you're not used to that. And yeah, when I was talking about it, it's like what you said. Because this will always stand out to me in my coaching career. Is I was watching a Cal men's water polo match, and they were playing like Long Beach or something, and we were absolutely annihilating them at halftime. And their coach was so ticked, he just told them all to go in the water and start swimming. He just yelled. I didn't hear what he said. I just heard some yelling, and then I saw all them in the water swimming butterfly, like as a punishment at halftime. Everyone's laughing at him, like. But I tell you what, they came back and they started playing a lot better, and they didn't win, but they came. But I just think of it as like, hey, if you're losing flow state and intention in your mind, you need to do something physical to get back. It's actually not conditioning. That's right. That's the trick. It's not conditioning. It's just a mental, hey, what do we need to get you re-engaged and Exactly. But people like conflate it with that. That's what I was saying. If I coached, that's how I would use it. But I'd also have to like kind of pretend like I'm angry too, and not just like intellectually doing it. I don't know, like play the part. But no, I love what you said, Lee, about the large court and half court. It was reminding me of, because you had said like, yeah, more quads for those small-sided games. And Graham Morris, who's been on, had laid out like, okay, if you're doing long, like rectangular fields, like it's more like hamstrings and more at the ankle. And if it's small side, it's more like quads and adductor. Yeah. And actually, I've been, I'd love to put this into, hey, I'm actually coaching the team and writing this in the workouts, but like I tend to do that a lot with my own workouts that I write, and even things I do myself. It's like, all right, if it's COD, then we'll squat because it's kind of more of a squat thing. But if it's upright max velocity, then there's more hip and ankle dominant things that you're doing. And so it's kind of cool you have that. And of course, the sport's the most intense thing you could do anyway. So why not have like a plan on what kind of spaces and then the physiology? It all kind of works together.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's if you're, I'm fortunate to have, a strength and conditioning background and understand exercise science. Which a lot of coaches that coach a sport might not have that background. So I manipulate my practices that way. The players don't know why. Even my assistant coaches probably don't know why I'm doing certain things, but that's why I do it. So I know sometimes I'm just trying to get them how much to a threshold, like how much can you take?
Yeah.
Because we do have overtime games. We do have other teams that like to press us, so it becomes a track meet. And, the strong survive. And so we put them in those environments. And when I go half court, we get more repetitions on working on our concepts, but we also get more repetition on change of direction, on escaping and attacking space, and even jumping, because you've got more opportunities at one basket. It happens quicker. So, you can manipulate the variables very easily that way. But then when we go full court, it's a little different. It's a little different pace. It's change of pace. It's more opening up. And so it's a great way to be able to condition and put in the change of direction demands that you need.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about, you said the advantage, disadvantage. I'm sure this is pretty written into a lot of sport coaching, is creating those situations as I trip over my words. But like, I feel like the purposeful manipulation is maybe something that's missed. And I think about that. I was going to ask you if you do that even with just general speed training, like one-on-one, like, hey, you pull a sled, but you have to start back the other guy starts back further, right. And you have to chase down the person. I know when I was coaching club track in California with just like, 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders, we would do a lot where one person runs over mini hurdles or wickets, and the other person starts just a little bit back and has to catch up with it, that kind of thing, And I feel like it's just inherently athletic too. So I was going to ask, one, if you do anything like that with the speed, just general speed, and ways you might go about that. And then two, I did want to get a little bit more into how you might frame up some of that once you start to get, because to me, it's all kind of a continuum. It's like starting very simple and then it's working into more information, more chaos. And the more we can understand that continuum, I think the more I'm like making hand gestures, the more connections we can make.
Yeah, absolutely. So an exercise I really like to do, because I like to have multiplanar movement, different positions and different patterns. So imagine taking an athlete and putting them on the foul line, and their partner that they're going with happens to be on the dotted circle line. So it'd be like the middle of the lane. So I don't know what that is, maybe 2 yards, something like that, away. Both of them are facing the basket. The partner closest to the basket does a hip turn and sprints past the person at the foul line. The person at the foul line immediately starts backpedaling as fast as they can, as far as they can, until they get past. So we compete players against players. And the goal is to see who can get the furthest backpedal. And I try to partner them up with even speeds or as close as I can. And then we'll do the same thing with a shuffle. So now how far can you shuffle before your partner passes you in a sprint? But that partner has to start with a hip turn. So we're learning a technique in our press that we use. But it's very competitive. And these guys really bust their butts on these. And we teach them the back pedal. We teach them like a cornerback, nose over toes. And they're really good at it. And if they do fall, we teach them how to fall and just, get your wrist out of it, and stuff like that. But they don't usually fall because they're pretty good at it now. So we do a lot of competitions like that. It's not even, who can tag who. It's how far on the court can you go before you get past? And that's a different stimulus for them. You know what I mean? They don't get out of character as much, where if you run and try to tag them, then they start doing funky things with their body, like, don't touch me, but if you just make them, they just stay in character and they'll go as fast as they can with the shuffle, back pedal, lateral run or whatever. And so it's really competitive and it's a great way to do it. But that's just an example of the types of things that we like to do.
Yeah. I'm already thinking about how to scale that for youth soccer now. That's so cool. It's amazing too. You think about like with forward running, right? Like if we're not in team sports, like, all right, well, how do we condition? Well, we do forward running, but how about back? I mean, it's not like you're going to run forwards in basketball for that long on the average play, and you're going to shuffle a lot. You're going to backpedal a lot. So why not create situations that can also emphasize those movements and gamify them and put intention behind them? Right. I mean, to me, it seems like if you warmed up with a bunch of things like that, the end product would be really powerful. Then you go into practice and it's like you almost are hitting the supercharger on a number of abilities versus only, the forward motion, which forward is cool. Like I do a lot of sprint work, but it all works together too.
That's right. Well, we have a pattern that I use. So in my model on the top, as you're looking at the sheet on the top left is my locomotive literacy. It's the 7 patterns. On the other side, it's spatial and body awareness, which is the 180 series. So when we're doing that game I just described, that back pedal turns into a 180 as soon as you get beat. Yeah. So imagine going back, transitioning, you're the first person back, but they're on a fast break and somebody flies by you. Well, you have to now get out of your back pedal, turn and run to make sure you don't get beat to the basket. Well, that's a 180 series from a back pedal to a run. Other times, you're going to run forwards, hit half court, and then you turn around and then you backpedal the rest of the way. Well, that's a very important skill in the sport of basketball, in the sport of soccer. I'm sure in field hockey and lacrosse, as you get deeper, you're the deepest person. You're going to have these transitional actions, which they fall under the umbrella of the 180 series, and there's a ton to that. Which actually helps the athlete. So when I'm doing these things, it always has a means to an end because we're trying to get better at our defensive transition because we press. And you're going to get beat. Press doesn't work 100% of the time. You're going to get beat. So we tell our athletes, we don't give up. This is what we do. This is how we recover.
Yeah, I love that. Is that so I was going to ask you about 1v1s, 2v2s. I mean, I'm assuming so when you are doing 1v1s, that is a big component of that. So where it's like just like linking and transition speeds, and it's more those raw physiological pieces that can then go into all the decision making as you add more players in.
100%. Yep. And there's a lot. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll get players matched up where, like, let's say you and I were going against each other and your dribble speed up the court was faster than my just dead sprint speed because you're just a faster athlete. And we get those situations a lot. We let it happen. And I let them get beat a couple times and then we'll stop. And I'll say to the group, what would you do if you're guarding Russell Westbrook or you're guarding, Derrick Rose when Derrick was playing these unbelievable, or De'Aaron Fox, right? These guys were just lightning speed. You're going to get up close on them full court. Are you going to give a cushion and play angles? And the team will say, well, we're going to give them a cushion. I'm like, okay, well, let's go. Let's do it. You stop getting beat on the first step and then you're out of it. So now we start that's the decision making. But if I was a lot quicker than you, same thing. Now I can hug you. I can get up in you because I know I can catch you if you beat me. That's a different style. So we really work on that a lot. And I tell the kids, you get 2 minutes to figure it out in a game. You'll know who you're guarding. Can you dominate them physically, or is it even, or are they going to physically dominate you? Either way, you got to make a decision to make your adjustment. And that's how we play. And I tell the kids, I'll tell the kids sitting on the sideline, ready to get in, sub in, pay attention to the guy you're going to guard. Can you stay with him? Or do you think he's going to go by you? And that's how we decide what we're going to do.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Gym Studio. Gym Studio is a frictionless gym and studio management software. It can effortlessly manage memberships, schedule classes, track attendance, and even automate billing. To check out what Gym Studio can do for you, head to gymstudio.com and set up your free 14-day trial in less than 5 minutes. Today's podcast is sponsored by the Athletic Development Games educational program. This program includes a video library of fun and engaging games aimed at kids ages 4 to 10 years old. In the program, you'll find activities for speed, coordination, jumping, and more, with new videos added each month. The games are fun, engaging, and they also invoke the imagination. It's given me great ideas already for my youth sports teams, as well as plenty of games to play with my own children. To sign up for the course, you can head to athleticdevelopmentgames.com/app. And you can use the coupon code JUSTFLY, that's JUSTFLY with all caps, at checkout for an exclusive 50% off. Yeah, it's like this, it's the regular practice of how to deal with space and the player and the speed of the player. And just taking time for that, versus I think it'd be common just to be like, hey, here's the drill, here's the set, and not really think about the nuances of how players actually move, locomotion, how much space to give a person. I'm sure there's a lot of coaches who do it, but to train it instinctively too, to give situations where you can just learn and figure this out. This player, how much space do I have to give them? How much? Yeah, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Well, one of the drills that we do, and when I coached recreation soccer, I did the same thing with those kids when I took that over, is I put them in situations, we call it advantage play. So my defender is either next to me or behind me when the ball gets put in play. And then there's the other two, my teammate and then another defender. So I'm obviously going to beat my guy because he's next to me or behind me. And then what's the other defender going to do? What's your decision? Are you going to come all the way? Or do you know my defender can catch me and cut me off? Because if you know I'm going to beat him, you got to come. You got to commit. Yeah. And then what we do is we call it X and out. So you guard me, I go guard the other guy, your guy. It's kind of like switching. And we put them in those situations. And they're like, even my son one time, he goes, well, which one do I do? I said, I don't know. Which one? I don't know. Which one would you do? I don't know. Yeah, let's play. Let's see. If you get beat 5 times in a row, I could probably guess what you shouldn't be doing. But I put him in a situation. I'm like, I don't know, guys. I'm not telling you the answer. I'm just telling you what to look for and find the decision that you have to make. I said, I don't have the answers always, but I do know you're going to have to make a decision on this to start to slow the ball down. So yeah, it's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's where it has to be so exciting too. I think a lot of times it can be there's these very separate containers. Okay, you're training strength, you're training speed, you're playing your sport, you're working with the development coach or whatever, right? And to be able to see almost and work with all the layers in one shot in a way, it's like, okay, it's speed plus decision making, and we can work on all this right here. Or at the least too, I think ideas of, if I'm not training in the sports setting and it's like just a group in a gym, we do speed, but we're also setting it up so there is decision elements that are combined with that. I was the seminar I put together with Austin Yoakum in June. Austin has this really cool thing I liked. It was called Muddles, which is like 3-on-3 or 4-on-4 single possession games, different ways of throwing the ball around or whatnot. But I was like, these are so cool. They're so simple. This would be so great on the tail end of a speed session, because it's like, well, can you use what you just did? Can you make the decision? Can you close space? Can you attack space? And yeah, it's, I just think it's very, I love the possibilities and the sequencing when, you can scale it up into chaos and the needs of team sport.
Exactly. Well, we have all these words for speed, right?
Yeah.
In track and field, we eliminate a lot of those words because the goal is to reach your maximal speed for that event and try to finish first or the best time you can get. But in basketball, soccer, these other sports, now the words like change of pace, directional speed, or angular speed starts to enter into the conversation. So that exercise I just talked about, 2-on-2 advantage, offense has the advantage, but based on if the defense is fast enough or not fast enough, the offense has to learn to change pace because they can't go always 100 miles an hour. You're going to just run into a wall.
Yeah.
You got to be able to change pace and then reestablish quick acceleration again. So we talk about that a lot. So sometimes when I even do sprint training, I'll when I give them a whistle, and this came from phys ed, like 1 whistle was walk, 2 whistles was jog, 3 whistles was kind of run, and 4 was sprint as fast as you can. So I'll do that sometimes when these guys with the ball. If I yell 1, they change pace. 2, they got to change into a higher gear. And, so we give them something that they have to adapt to. And then I get out of the picture, and now they do that exact same thing based on what the defender does. So it just kind of gives them the context.
Yeah, layers of pace. That's so huge. Yeah. Even honestly, I write sprint workouts with a lot of the layering of, fast, faster, fastest, and like just different, or sprint, float, sprints. And that itself is such a great teacher, because when the athlete can kind of take on and absorb those different layers, that's where the magic really happens. And
100%. Yep.
I think there's so much that's there with that. Man, I had another question I was going to ask you right along those lines of things, but it escaped me. But I did want to come back to that. As it happens a lot to me, I'm sure it'll come back to me here. But I wanted to ask you about. This is actually here it was. Because I wanted to ask you about One Brain, but you had mentioned on a previous podcast about just how important soccer is, like for all players. If you aren't basketball, and you were mentioning that drill, I would imagine too that like from a donor space, not only just like lower body, adductors, groins, and training those things, but also just a really basic way to, there's so much spatial awareness involved too, with where's the defender, where's the ball. It just seems like it would complement any other sport well from that perspective as well. It's so simple, like you were describing, like. Yeah. It's just a really simple way to get more of these principles in.
It is. You're talking about the advantage drill, the 1-on-1 or 2-on-2.
Yeah, and soccer too. Like in combination with soccer. I feel like you could probably do that in the off season with basketball players, right? And they'd learn a lot from it.
We did, yeah. When I was coaching the soccer, we did a ton of that stuff, and it was about. So what we would see is, so offensively, the skill is maintaining the dribble, the ball on your feet as you're playing soccer, and then being able to kick on goal or shoot on goal at the appropriate time. Well, what do they do when they panic? They kick right off. I mean, they could be 40 yards and they're going to try to launch it. Doesn't even get there, right? Because they panic with that defense coming. And it's like, sometimes it's about creating space. Maybe you push your ball out to the side to create separation. Now it gives you a chance to decide your next move because you're not in contact anymore. So, it's just, and the fun part for me is they would ask me like, well, when do I do that? I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know. Yeah. I can't tell you when. It's a feel. And I would say to them, start to eliminate the fear of being wrong, because I'm not going to ever yell at you if you make a mistake. The only time I'll get on you is if your attitude and your effort's bad. But other than that, if you made a really bad decision, that's, hey, join the party, because I probably made 10,000 of them, right, in all my sports. But I said, that's how you're going to figure it out. But I said, I wish I could tell you exactly when. There's just no way to know. It's going to happen when it's going to happen. And the more you play, the more you'll figure out, hey, maybe if you pull your defender a little wider, the goalie has to come with you because of the angle. Now your teammate's open. Yeah. So let's try that. See if that works.
That's so huge. The longer I've worked with youth sports, the more I realize like just psychology, fear, like nervousness of the environment or doing the wrong thing, and then extrapolate that all the way out. I think it was Scott Prohaska or maybe a few others talking about how like players even on the high school level, they're so afraid to do the wrong thing, like only do this thing just to make the play so the coach doesn't get mad or you make it to the next level. And So it's like to have that space where you can be wrong. It's okay. Like, this is why we're here. Just so important.
Yeah, it is. And I don't mean to belabor that because I know you have other questions, but I think this is such an important
Yeah.
topic and it's something I'm passionate about. So I constantly say to my players, my job, my assistant coaches, our job is to teach you and coach you and help you when we can and when we can't. You don't give us that opportunity when you're afraid to make a mistake. But when you go hard, you're playing, at the speeds you should be playing, and you shoot the ball, or shoot on goal, or you shoot a basket or whatever, and it doesn't work out well. Well, that gives us an opportunity to assess what's going on. Doesn't mean we're going to say anything at that moment, but at least we start to see patterns occurring. But when you're holding back and just getting rid of the ball because you don't want to make a mistake, now we can't coach you very well. I can't teach you anything because you didn't even like make an attempt to be aggressive in our offensive. And I said, I will probably get on you more for being passive than I will for being overly aggressive. I can control your over aggressiveness, but when you're really passive, there's not much I can do. I can't help you because you didn't commit. So what it does is, in a practice where they actually hear me say, great attempt, Joel. That's exactly what I would have done. That was really, really good. Hey, it didn't go in. Who cares?
Yeah.
We all miss it. That's not what I loved is you took an aggressive approach and you went at it. Now everybody else hears that. And then at least for that time being, the fear goes away. It comes back because that's fear. It doesn't just go away. It comes back in other situations until we can overcome it. But that's how we get them to open up. And we play a very conceptual style of play. And this is our third year. And now we're starting to see it's taking place now, because conceptually, it's not like I'm going to tell you where to go. I just give you a concept. This is what you should do in this situation, but you got to read it. Now they're starting to get it. And we're playing really, really good brand of basketball now. 2 years ago, it was ugly. But I told them and the parents, you got to be patient with us. This will work. And now they're starting to see it work. So it just took time.
Yeah, I remember, I think it was you who had said something a long time ago on this podcast. It was something to do with when players are young, even if it's kind of sloppy, as long as they're going fast and they're not afraid, they're just moving fast. Maybe the ball goes out of bounds or whatever, but those players, they will get control later. And I'm starting to see that now coaching youth athletes, as you see the kids who they have it, like they move fearlessly. They're going to kick the ball out of bounds. They're going to miss the goal, but like they play at a high speed and they're going to get it. And so much of it is just encouraging the other kids, or putting them in situations where they feel safe enough to move at a high speed. And it is funny too. Like we'll play freeze tag. And I guess this could have inroads too to like, hey, you're working in the gym. You just have a general group. We're just playing, right? Like, and when these soccer kids, when the ones who are a little bit more timid on the field, but if it's freeze tag, sometimes they get a lot more, they feel safer. There's like not the ball, or maybe they frame mistakes up differently and they can move fast. And I'm like, and I frame a lot of practices as how can we move as a team as fast as possible through this practice, and we'll feed the safe stuff into, okay, well now the ball's out here. And so it's it's so interesting to see how that changes as, and athletes' mindsets on mistakes and like you said, and you're now in their higher performance realm, you have to almost rewire their mindset around that. And what if I make a mistake, or what if this or that or the other thing? Because it's just such a huge part of it. And I think, we can address it specifically. And also hopefully like the space in the gym where, hey, this isn't your sport. Let's find a way to do this. Look, you can do it. Okay. Like how can we take that out into your actual sport as well now?
Exactly. Yep. It's so important. And play, this is the conversation I have with parents, especially young parents that have young kids. I mean, play doesn't have a governor as where sport does. So what I mean by that is, like on the old mopeds, if you took the governor off, you could go over the speed limit for those things. The young kids used to do it. They'd get a moped that could only go 25. They take the governor off and they're flying on this thing. Well, play is just play. There's no governor. Kids are just they'll do what they want. They'll play. There's no judgment. And judgment is the governor. But once they go to an organized sport, now there's judgment. And so that governor is throttled way down and the kids just don't want to make mistakes. So the longer they stay in play, the less they're affected by being judged, because the play gives them the foundations that make them better. And as they get better, we get confident, and then the governor doesn't affect us as much. So it's really important that they play and we give them that opportunity to have it. And I try to do that with my practices. Sometimes I'm like, guys, ignore us. You guys call your own fouls, you call the out of bounds, and you solve your own issues. Coach and I are going to be watching. We're taking notes, but you're on your own in terms of, we're not going to say anything. Sometimes those are our best practice segments when we get out of the way.
Yeah, it's funny. I'd never even thought about that, because I'm always thinking about, like coaching a lot or a little in light of like a track and field event. Like, hey, I'll just let this person run through their high jump, and I'll just encourage. You've talked about that, right? Like, just, hey, first few reps, just encourage them, and being mindful of what and when you say. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about that in basketball, because I don't know that I was ever given that opportunity in actual practice. But to be honest, I mean, occasionally it'd be like, hey, warm up with one-on-one or something like that. Honestly, I probably played faster. I guarantee I played a lot faster when it was that kind of thing. That's so interesting you put it that way. And this frames up with something that I asked you actually before we pushed record. It was a question I was thinking about, but like the idea of the natural athlete. Stephen Jones has mentioned this. Like, we used to have this like natural athlete who just grew up on free play and, riding bikes and running all over the place and probably not wearing shoes half the time. And, like what specifically changes when it's, okay, now you're this age, now you go with this coach, and that's the majority of your sport experience versus the athlete who doesn't. It's interesting to think about. And how do you, at least in this unfortunate, I don't know, so I say dystopia of a sports world, but it's heading that way, like, how do you create an experience for an athlete that reflects that, how we should come up, with all the free play? So I love that autonomy piece you have there.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And we saw it in the Olympics, right? In some of the team sports, when these NBA champions didn't play in a game, and for whatever reason, didn't play in a game. And sometimes you're wondering, okay, was it a situational thing where they kind of panicked a little bit in this high stakes game? Because the Olympics is, especially when you get to the final, that's NBA championships, I know, are great and they want to win those. But man, when you're in the Olympics and you say, we're the best of the best, that matters. And sometimes when they've only played in an organized club and they were never really brought up. So a lot of the guys, my generation, they grew up playing in Rutgers Park, or the parks in Chicago or in Oakland or, Texas, whatever, with no coaching. Even my summer leagues, when I played in high school, the coaches didn't go with us. A bunch of us got in a car. We drove to our summer league game at 7:00, played, subbed ourselves in and out. It was unbelievable. We taught ourselves, and that's what made us really good. So what happens is, because there's a ton of skills coaches now, always coaching everything, these players are getting highly skilled. But when emotions and segments of a game get really tense and really tight, that stuff isn't the stuff that matters. It's being able to be calm and collected and relaxed, because you did it the whole time growing up as a kid, just playing with your friends, and you've done that situation a million times. But if I'm playing on a team where the coach says, no, you don't go there, that's not your spot, you're over here all the time. Well, in the game, what if you get stuck over there? Now you're panicking, right? Yeah. So I just think there's a lot of value to that.
Yeah, I totally agree. The thing I have in my head, like you mentioned, like word, like the language, it's almost like the moped. It's like, take off the governor. Like, in practice, how can we get these governors off as much as they can be, at least? I'm sure some practice is a little bit more strategic, but at some point you have to, and if that doesn't happen, at least semi-regularly, you do have these robotic movers that can only solve to a certain level. And even the way that athletes move too, I'm sure there's some little nuances in there, just that fluidity, the confidence, all those little pieces that really make that happen. So
definitely. Yep.
Yeah, it's it's something I'm excited for my next soccer practice. Putting these ideas in motion, but it makes me, I love track and field and, sports performance, general sports performance, but this makes me want to get like, all right, high school, like freshman basketball team, let's go. Like, it's just seeing all those shades of the total picture. So I wanted to finish today. I just had a few more. I know we've talked, a little bit more like team sport, team speed, that spectrum of how things bleed into team sport speed. I did want to finish with some things that were a little bit more general or maybe a little bit more local on the level of like change of direction ability. Something I wanted to ask you, and just listening to and trying to learn a lot more about just the biomechanical routes of things, was your thoughts on just how you go about using, like when would you be a good idea to use bands in change of direction and not use them, like basically, or contrasting between them, just because I think people see like bands, it's like, oh, we just always use these, or what's the nuance, right? Like, I'm just curious, what is the nuance of using like a resistance in a change of direction movement or a cutting activity and those types of things?
Yeah. It's cool with that question. It brings us back to, pretty much why do we do anything? What decisions do we use in strength and conditioning or in, multi-directional speed training or sprint training or whatever? Why? And when I do my seminars or conferences, I'll always say, so coaches, why would you, like, what does this band offer me as a coach? And what does it offer my athlete? When I put a resistance around them and they have to push against that resistance, what does it do from a force standpoint? What does it do from a gait cycle standpoint if we're, accelerating straight ahead or lateral gait shuffle or lateral run or whatever? What is it enhancing and what is it detracting from? And so when we start looking at it that way, we can start to say, well, yeah, why would I use it there if it's actually doing what I don't want it to do? You know what I mean? So when I use bands, a band at a moderate to lighter tension is a great way to create activation, or we could call it even as a lighter form of potentiation before a practice. If we do both sides, we get unilateral, and then we make sure we get the other side as well. So it could be used for that. But if we're going to work on it mechanically, if I have an athlete that has trouble translating in the direction they're trying to go and move their center of mass per step, not just in general, but per step, each step, can I translate with proper gait cycle mechanics and not overstride or understride? Can the band help me do that? And the answer is yes, if the right dosage, the right tension, and the right positioning of the band is used. And so when I apply bands to my team, like I have these super long bands, about 110 inches. They're not the 30-inch that maybe 40 inch. I think, the 40 inch is a normal loop band. Mine are 110 inches, so they're pretty big. So we do a lot of stuff with it, but it's to overcome their body weight. Okay, it's an overcoming technique. We use it for activation. But some athletes, even right during the drill, if I don't like what it's doing, I'll say, okay, guys, Joel, I want you and your partner, you're actually going to pull yourself through this. So you're going to assist. So get on the other side while everyone else is pulling. You're on the other side. You're going to pull them because I need your feet to come through quicker. You're taking too long of a stride and your feet aren't recovering fast enough. So you're going to do it that way. And I might say, hey, Lee, you and your partner have to do the same thing. You're kind of in the same boat. And that's how I'll run a practice. I just have and I'll tell the guys, don't think I'm doing something better for them and not for you. I'm making an adjustment based on what they need. I'm trying to help each one of you. And so when we talk about this band resistance, if I'm going to work on pure acceleration, okay, there's a methodology, there's a technique, and there's a reason. But if I'm going to work on change of direction, now I have to assist you into the leg plant or the foot plant, and then you change directions. And then we go through the same questioning again. Well, what am I actually trying to enhance? Am I trying to enhance angle of entry into the ground with my leg plant? Am I trying to manage upper body sway, or too much yielding? Am I trying to dose some capacity to see that you can hit the right foot angle and use a full foot contact? So I'm going to give you more opportunities to do that. So that's kind of how we do it. It's funny because I'll say to the guys, like, all right, guys, I want about 5 reps, and they'll start. And on the 3rd rep, I'll say, okay, good, stop. They're like, no, we got 2 more. No, I saw what I wanted. That was perfect. Next, ready, go. And then the next time they might get 5 reps. And they're like, why? Even my son will say, Dad, how come you had them do more than us or us more than them? I'm like, because I needed to. It was just, that was why I did it. I did it because I saw something I didn't like or I liked, and that's all I needed. So it kind of bugs them.
Yeah.
But for me, it's what I needed to see, and that's kind of how I manage it.
Yeah. There's like that aliveness piece to coaching. I think sets and reps is just where we start. And eventually your intuition says, hey, oh, we're good here. Like, and it's almost too, it's like there's this intuitive sense of when the athlete's system is a little bored with the thing too. And now we need to change it. Maybe their head doesn't even know it quite yet, but sometimes the body does. So with the you mentioned the angle of entry. So would you use a COD or a cut? Would you use resisted more to improve their angle of entry into the cut, and then assisted if their feet are just kind of like over pushing or a little lopey? Would that be a good general?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a really good starting point right there. And then you adjust because and the reason I'm always talking about have a model of what it should look like to cut. And there's different versions of cuts because of the angle you're cutting at. But let's just say we're doing a lateral shuffle and we're cutting, changing direction, and we're going back on a straight line. So it's pretty much 180 degree difference. Well, I don't have a lot of variables then, other than is my upper body messing up a great leg plant or an angle of entry? Because I could plant perfect, perpendicular foot, full foot contact, shin angle's great, knees in the right position, but then my upper body over tilts. Now I just, now it changes the meaning of the energy coming back out of the ground from that leg plant. So, and this is important for coaches who are listening to understand, I don't need to mess with the leg plant because that wasn't the issue. It was the upper body. So now I have to manipulate the upper body through strategies. There's a ton of stuff you can do, fake throws or manipulating where the bands are on the ribs versus down below the ASIS joint or PSIS joint. Yeah, I could put it down below that, and then it doesn't influence the upper body that much. So you can kind of manipulate it really easy. But if you have a model, you can tell what's distorted. It's just like if you saw me shoot a basketball and I go, you say, well, that doesn't look right. If I whip it around my head, like that doesn't fit any model I know of how to shoot a basketball. All right, so now you know at least where to start. You can start correcting me from that. Same thing with change of direction or a shuffle or a jump. You should have a basic general model, and then you can figure out what parts need to have a little more attention.
Yeah. What I love that with the upper body and the band manipulation. I was going to ask you about medicine balls, but yeah, you mentioned like fake throws. I know I've seen you do a lot of work with medicine balls to help control and add a constraint to the upper body. What is it specifically you see with deciding to put it on the hips or like the upper body? What are you getting out of either of those? Is there a specific adaptation you're looking for with a high attachment versus a low?
Yeah. So if I attach it low, so let's say I put it right on my right hip and I'm shuffling, let's say I'm working on change of direction. So I'm shuffling to my left. So the band is pulling me in. It's on my right hip and it's pulling me to my left. And maybe I'm going to shuffle once and then I'm going to shuffle back against that resistance. And you're holding it. And if you're holding that band pretty parallel with the ground, so it's pretty level, we'll get what we call a float concept or a float technique. So I'll have a little bit easier time staying in the air when I go into that cut. But if exact same hip placement, but you now get down on your knees and you pull that band down at about a 45 degree vector down to the ground, now that gives me a quicker ground contact time. Same thing. The minute I go above my hip and the top of my pelvis, if I get up to my ribs, the bottom of my ribs, it creates a tilting in the direction that I'm going to plant my leg at because the band is below that. So you're holding it below. So it's kind of going down. So as I go into it, it kind of tilts me that way. So my foot that's going to cut first touches the ground very quickly. So I can manipulate the foot contact because it's rotating me in the air because the way does that make sense?
Yeah.
It kind of, tilts me. So, but if I even had it on my ribs, but the band was held really high, I still will have a little bit more float time than I would if the band was held low. So you can manipulate how quickly they get into the ground. I had a clinic not too long ago, and some of the athletes would reach. They'd go to their cut, and they'd almost like lunge, or you know what I'm saying? They almost like do a lateral leap into the cut. And I'm like, no. Get your foot down quick because you want to change it. You don't want to like be in the air and then plant and go. And so I did that with them. I put a band on them and
Mm.
I kind of went on a different vector and they went up right into it really fast. And it changed.
Yeah.
You can almost see them react to it. It kind of threw them off balance. I'm like, well, that's why we manipulate with the bands.
Yeah. I am instantly going to find a way to, I don't know where I'm going to attach the bands. I can attach it like at a low level for my own training. Like now I want to find a way to attach it low and high. That reminds me of a Darian Barr had a thing where, and I did this on a fence, like I put an Exergenie like high on a fence to do sprints because we always do resisted sprints only from, the same place on the ground basically. Right. And we can do all sorts of cool manipulations, but we never really think about, well, what if the attachment point was higher, which that encourages kind of more of a forward shin roll, almost like a lower rolling action of the shins. And if you had it like buried in the ground, you'd probably have more of like a scissoring, bounding back and forth type way of getting off the ground. It's just, it's so cool to think about. I just think it's something we just don't think about, but once you can do it, it adds that extra dynamic of exploration. And I just think I think that's a lot more powerful too than like trying to directly coach someone to do something versus, hey, what if I just had the band higher? Now they're going to do it automatically,
The feeling. Well, that goes back to a saying I've used for years is, don't be teachers of drills, be teachers of skills.
Yeah.
And basically what that means is, so when I built all these models for different movements and patterns and all, I literally just took the time to watch film over years and watch athletes move. And I'd sit there and I'd kind of scratch my head for a while and I have a pencil and I draw and I'd say, okay, if I'm going to manipulate using physics and then the biomechanics of how a gait cycle works, how can I do that to get the result that I want? And that's how I go through all that's why I call them correctives. So the like 100-meter sprint is the skill. If I add a band, hurdles, anything, that's a corrective. I'm trying to correct something or enhance or improve something. So that's how I go through it. So when I years ago was messing with band training, I said, well, what result do I get if I do this? And that's how I did it. And that's how I was able to make I told you I had a girl earlier this morning. We did some stuff with her and did some quick manipulations and it bam, just like that makes a quick impact on the way she was moving today, just by where we positioned the band or the box. I used a low box with her too.
Yeah. I was going to ask about with the low box and like step ups. I saw you had some videos of step ups recently, and that leads to like the last question I was going to ask you was, I just think and the more coaches, the seasoned coaches, experienced coaches I talk to have been through the decades, I feel like you always miss so much. It's like, all right, the 90s went by. Now, what do we take with us? What do we miss? Wait, no, that was cool. Or the 80s or, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And is there any methods that you feel like from, when you were growing up and coaching, like 80s, 90s, that are really underappreciated? Like we should go back and use this thing. Anything there that you feel there's something we missed along the way?
I think, well, I know from my standpoint, I learned, from some other people over time. And a lot of it was track coaches way back. When I studied a lot of the German models and Eastern Bloc and even guys like Don Chu way back, you mentioned step ups, like things like that. And I was always a big step up guy. I used that for power. And I think we got away from it in lieu of all these other techniques, which are good too, split squats and all. I'm not saying better or worse. I'm just saying, gosh, those were some great, easy things to implement really good. One thing that I think we kind of use and, we do, but I think it got away and I learned it a long time ago was medicine ball throwing and training. We've got all these, fancier things that we do with them now, but just good old fashioned generating force, throws, different models of throwing. I was taught a long time ago, and I always remember this. If you're going to do a throw versus a toss, so a throw would be, I'm pushing it versus I toss it. So the ball is away from my body.
Yeah, like a push versus a pull, kind of basically.
Yeah, kind of same thing. And so I implement a lot of that stuff because I understand what it's impacting and how it impacts the foot, because I like throwing from my feet. And when you throw from your feet, like try throwing on ice. You try to throw a ball on ice, you're going to slip and fall because there's no friction. But so when I do a throw properly and I position my feet, yes, I'm working on the power of executing the throw, but I'm actually working on a cut. because if I generate enough force with my upper body, it translates into that foot that's helping me push off to throw the ball. So we can manipulate it. So I think though I learned that, gosh, Joel, 30 years ago, probably more than that, because my dad used to talk to me a lot about when he did medicine ball stuff way back in the 40s and stuff. So I think things like that and keeping it really simple and building upon the simplicity of it to get the result we want, the power result or the strength result or the impulse result or whatever it is.
Yeah. I think the beautiful thing about all that is it's just so simple. Like even a step up. I thought about this like 4 or 5 years ago is like when you watch kids play, like kids really don't know how to lunge. Like if you have them do lunges, they can kind of do it, but not like, but compared to like walking up steps, or like climbing like we go hiking and you're hiking up a bunch of rocks, and you're stepping up like that's in their wheelhouse. It's like they get it. Of course we have to, learn different skills over time, but it's just something that's so simple and wired into who we are to build basic leg strength. And the medicine ball throws and it's clearly stood the test of time. So it's I think if we took all the old stuff we learned, just go back even just to the 70s, all the different types of lifts, the barbell lifts and all the different stuff, and we asked ourselves, number one, why? And if we asked, how can that help me in this environment or this situation? Because that's how I treat multi-directional speed. People see the drills in the low box, and I see people on social doing the low box, and they're not even close to what it's supposed to be. Yeah. It's an intentional exercise because the pelvis undulates when it moves, and that's how I can manipulate that and help angles and stuff. And that's how I started 30 years ago. So I watch people do it, and they look at it, and I can tell they're not asking, well, what am I trying to impact in this athlete? You know what I mean? If we just did that, all the old school stuff would come back in great form and function if we just knew how to manipulate it to accomplish our goals. It's just that we do it. Some people just do it. I'm just going to go ahead and do it. I'm like, well, what are you doing? Like, what are you trying to accomplish? And if we can't answer that, a lot of times it looks pretty messy. Yeah. Sometimes I think that if coaches were just locked in a room with one piece of equipment, and that's the only piece you can use to train athletes for the next month, you're going to get, it's the simple thing done savagely well. You're going to get good at this. You're going to understand the purpose of this thing. Like a low box, like all you can use is a low box for a month to speed train everybody. You can get pretty good at low box or a year, but nothing works that way anymore. It's just like a million things. And, so it's, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, hey, thank you so much, Lee, for coming on the show. It was great talking to you again. I learned, I have a whole page of notes here. And I have tons of things I got to figure out now how I'm going to get my bungee cord, a high, low, medium, so I can do some sprints on or change the direction on that. So I'm excited. You gave me a lot of ideas, and thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thanks, Joel. I always enjoy it. Have a great one.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode. I appreciate you being here, and I'll see you next week.